You are not alone anymore. I will stay with you. I promise I will never abandon you.
Joao was a simple man, known only as the caretaker of the small roadside chapel. On that cold morning of October 12th, a date dedicated to the Virgin Mary, something felt different. He walked slowly, carrying in his heart the weight of overdue bills and loneliness. The chapel barely received visitors, and donations had stopped months earlier. Even so, Joao opened the doors as he did every day, with silent faith. Before entering, he heard a faint sound coming from the roadside. If you believe that nothing happens by chance, stay until the end of this story. There, lying on the wet ground, was an abandoned and extremely thin dog. His eyes carried an old exhaustion, as if he had been forgotten by the world. Joao knelt down, touched by a pain that mirrored his own. He also felt discarded by life, struggling to keep the chapel open. The dog did not growl or run away, he only cried in silence. At that moment, two wounded destinies met without words, but Joao had no idea that this encounter would change everything. Joao's financial situation was desperate, with no human way out. The notice to close the chapel had already been delivered by the parish. Without resources, without help, and without family nearby, he felt powerless. Keeping the sacred place was his mission, but he no longer saw how to continue. The dog, too weak to walk, seemed to represent that same ending. Two beings on the edge of abandonment, united by pain. And the dilemma was clear: give up or trust in something greater. Joao took the dog inside the chapel, seeking shelter and comfort. He placed him at the feet of the image of the Virgin Mary, asking only for mercy. He did not ask for money or grand solutions, only a sign of hope. The silence of the place was deep, almost heavy. The dog lay down, staring fixedly at the sacred image. Joao felt a knot in his throat, overcome by an inexplicable emotion. Something was about to happen. As night fell, Joao made a silent promise. If the chapel survived, he would dedicate his life to helping the forgotten. The dog was breathing with difficulty, as if he would not last until dawn. Sadness dominated the atmosphere, but there was a strange peace in the air. It was the lowest point of the story, where everything seemed lost, but that is exactly where the divine usually acts. And in the next moment, an encounter would change the destiny of both. It was already past midnight when Joao felt a different presence inside the chapel. The air seemed lighter, and a soft fragrance of flowers filled the room. The dog, once weak, slowly lifted his head and became alert. Joao thought he was imagining things, the result of exhaustion and accumulated pain. But his eyes were drawn to a gentle light near the altar. It was not strong or frightening, only welcoming. His heart began to race without logical explanation. From the light emerged the silhouette of a woman dressed in simplicity and peace. Her gaze conveyed deep compassion, as if she knew every suffering present there. Joao fell to his knees, tears flowing uncontrollably. The figure did not speak much. She only made a simple and unexpected request. "Take care of him as if he were your brother," she said with a serene voice. The dog approached her without any fear. At that moment, Joao felt he was not facing someone ordinary. The woman gently touched the head of the abandoned dog. He stopped trembling and breathed deeply, as if relieving an old pain. Joao noticed that the wounds began to dry before his eyes. There was no rational explanation for what was happening. When he tried to say something, the woman only smiled. Within seconds, the light began to slowly fade, and with it, the presence disappeared. The chapel returned to silence, but nothing felt the same. Joao looked around, searching for some concrete sign of what he had seen. On the floor, he found a small white rose, still fresh. The dog was now standing firm, wagging his tail. His eyes no longer expressed pain, but joy. Joao felt a chill run through his entire body. That could not have been just a dream. With his heart racing, Joao understood the first sign of the miracle. The Virgin Mary had visited that simple and forgotten place. The dog, once condemned, now walked with renewed energy. It was only the beginning of something much greater. Joal's faith, once fragile, was rekindled with strength. But a new crisis was still to come, and it would put this experience to the test before the world. The next morning, Joal awoke to shouts outside the chapel. Heavy rain had caused a landslide on the nearby road. Several cars were trapped, and a child was missing. A climate of despair took over the small local community. Joal felt fear trying to dominate his newly renewed faith. The dog, now strong, ran out of the chapel, and it was exactly there that the new crisis began. The dog rushed through the mud as if he knew exactly where to go. Residents tried to stop him, but he escaped with impressive agility. Joal ran after him, feeling that something greater was in action. Minutes later, they heard insistent barking coming from a ravine. There was the child, trapped between branches and rocks. The dog stayed by her side, protecting her. The crowd was shocked by the scene. With the help of residents, the child was rescued without serious injuries. Collective testimony began to spread quickly. Everyone knew that the dog had been at the brink of death the night before. Now he acted like a true guardian. Some remembered the white rose found in the chapel. Others mentioned the perfume felt during the night. Doubt began to give way to certainty. One of the oldest residents asked to enter the chapel. As he approached the image of the Virgin Mary, he noticed something different. A small white cloth was attached to the hands of the image. Joao stated that it had not been there before. Silence filled the place once again. No one dared to touch that symbol. It was the physical proof that was missing. That day, Joao understood that he was not alone in this mission. The dog came to be seen as a living sign of the miracle. The community began to help with spontaneous donations. The chapel, once forgotten, began to receive visitors again. Collective faith was being restored. And that was only the beginning of divine confirmation. The next events would be even greater. In the days that followed, donations began to arrive without notice. People who had never visited the chapel appeared with supplies. Some left envelopes without identification at the altar. Overdue bills were paid one by one. Joao watched everything in silence, his heart filled with gratitude. The dog remained by his side, healthy and alert. The first financial solution had manifested. The parish priest responsible for the region decided to investigate the events. Upon hearing the testimonies, he was deeply moved. He confirmed that the date of the miracle coincided with a Marian celebration. During Mass, he publicly mentioned what had happened. The faithful began to pray before the image with greater fervor. The chapel was once again recognized as a place of prayer. Religious validation was underway. A woman who had suffered for years with severe pain in her legs visited the place. She knelt, touched the image, and made a simple prayer. The dog approached and lay beside her. Minutes later, she stood up without feeling any pain. Witnesses cried when they saw what happened. The woman walked on her own to the chapel door. The first confirmed healing had occurred. The news spread quickly through neighboring cities. People arrived seeking comfort, not just miracles. Family problems began to be reconciled right there. Old requests found unexpected answers. Joao carefully recorded each testimony. The dog had become a symbol of living hope. Blessings continued to multiply. What was once sadness was now transformed into collective joy. The chapel was no longer a forgotten place. The environment was one of renewed faith and constant gratitude. Joao realized that his promise was being fulfilled. The mission was beginning to take real shape. But the calling would go beyond that place. Something greater was about to be born. As visits increased, Joao realized he could not take care of everything alone. People touched by the story began to offer themselves as volunteers. Each one brought not only help, but also their own pain. The dog began to accompany prayers, moving among the faithful. Many said they felt peace when seeing him there. The environment transformed into a true space of welcome. The mission began to expand naturally. A small support network was created without formal planning. Residents organized food for people experiencing homelessness. Others brought abandoned animals to receive care. Faith became concrete action every day. The chapel became a meeting point for those who needed hope. The dog's example inspired compassion. Collective help gained strength. Stories of new small miracles began to emerge. People reported unexpected jobs after visits. Family conflicts found reconciliation. The sick reported relief after prayers. Nothing was forced. Everything happened with simplicity. João always emphasized that the focus was faith, and faith continued to spread. Neighboring cities began sending representatives to visit the chapel. Some priests participated in moments of prayer. Reports began to be documented more carefully. The presence of the dog became increasingly symbolic. He was seen as a sign of transformation. The mission ceased to be local. The reach began to grow. João understood that it no longer belonged to him. The work had become greater than himself. What began with pain now generated unity. The Virgin Mary had changed a sad destiny and now touched many others. But to continue, structure would be necessary, and that would lead to the next step. With constant growth, it became necessary to organize the mission. Meetings began to take place weekly in the chapel. Volunteers assumed specific roles with responsibility. A small statute was created with guidance from the parish. Everything was done with humility and transparency. João remained the spiritual guardian of the place. The work took concrete form. The chapel received small renovations thanks to continuous donations. Spaces were adapted to welcome families and animals. A simple place became a community support center. The image of the Virgin Mary became the central symbol. The dog was always nearby. He had become part of the mission's identity, a living sign of transformation. New volunteers came from different cities. Some were health professionals, others educators. Each offered what they could. The mission began to handle more complex cases. Situations of extreme abandonment found welcome. Faith became organized, but never cold. Love remained at the center. Over time, the initiative was recognized regionally. Invitations for testimonies began to appear. João always took the dog with him. The stories touched hearts wherever they went. Many returned to faith. The work went beyond the walls of the chapel. Its reach expanded. Despite the growth, João remained simple. He always remembered the first day of pain. The dog still slept at the foot of the altar. None of this would exist without that initial encounter. The mission was solid, but the calling continued. Something greater was still to come, and the world would begin to notice. A major crisis struck several cities in the region at the same time. Floods left entire families without shelter. Fear and despair spread quickly. The mission was called upon by different communities. João felt the weight of responsibility grow. The dog stayed by his side, firm. It was time to act on a larger scale. Volunteers mobilized within days. Trucks with food and medicine were organized. Moments of prayer preceded each action. In many places, people reported unexpected healings. Fevers stopped, pains disappeared. Faith spread along with help. Miracles began to happen in large numbers. In one of the shelters, an unconscious child began breathing on her own again. Witnesses reported feeling a soft fragrance in the environment. An image of the Virgin Mary was placed there. The dog approached the child and stayed beside her. Minutes later, she opened her eyes. Collective crying filled the space. Hope was reborn before everyone. Similar reports emerged in different cities. Healings, reconciliations, and deliverances multiplied. The mission began to be cited by community leaders. The local press started recording the events. Joao maintained focus on prayer and humility. He always pointed to heaven, never to himself. Public recognition drew closer. Invitations began arriving from other countries. Communities wanted to know the dog's story. The mission crossed borders. What was small now touched multitudes. Joao felt gratitude, but also reverent fear. He knew it came from God, and an even greater confirmation was still to come. Faced with so many reports, religious authority decided to officially investigate. A commission was sent to hear testimonies and analyze the signs. Joao reported everything with simplicity, without exaggeration. Volunteers and faithful confirmed the events. Nothing seemed forced or fabricated. The story maintained coherence from the first day. The faith of the simple was evident. The commission visited the chapel in silence and prayer. As they approached the altar, they felt an uncommon peace. Some noticed again the soft fragrance in the air. The dog remained lying at the feet of the image. One of the religious members became deeply emotional. He said he had never felt anything like it. The spiritual presence was undeniable. Documents, testimonies, and medical records were analyzed. Healings, once inexplicable, now had confirmation. The initial date coinciding with the Marian celebration was confirmed. Nothing contradicted doctrine or Christian faith. On the contrary, everything led to prayer and charity. The mission demonstrated concrete fruits. Recognition was approaching. In a special celebration, the authority announced its decision. The mission was officially validated by the church. The chapel received the title of a place of pilgrimage. A sacred symbol was given to Joao. It was a blessed rosary dedicated to the Virgin Mary. The dog was present throughout the moment. Emotion filled the faithful. Joao held the rosary with tears in his eyes. He remembered the day when everything seemed lost. Official confirmation sealed the mission. It was not human work, but divine. Faith had been publicly recognized, but there was still an important step. The future needed to be prepared. As the years passed, Joao began preparing new leaders. He knew the mission could not depend only on him. Young volunteers showed vocation and commitment. Each learned by example, not speeches. The story of the dog was told as the origin of faith. Love for the simple was the main teaching. The legacy began to be passed on. Among the young people, a woman named Anna stood out. She had arrived at the chapel in a moment of deep pain. There she found welcome and purpose. Joao began guiding her closely. She showed rare spiritual sensitivity. The dog always accompanied her on visits, a silent sign of continuity. The mission gained new centers led by this generation. Each maintained the essence of the first day. No ostentation or empty promises. Faith remained simple and alive. Teachings were passed on responsibly. The symbol of the Virgin Mary remained central. The work continued safely. Joao began to withdraw from more intense activities. His body already felt the weight of time, but his heart was at peace. He knew the mission was in good hands. The dog, now older, remained faithful. Together, they watched the work flourish. The future was prepared. In the last meeting he led, Joao spoke with serenity. He said everything began with an act of compassion, that the Virgin Mary acts through the simple, and that love transforms destinies. The young listened with attention and emotion. The cycle was nearing its end, but the legacy would continue. On the peaceful night of another October 12th, Joao entered the chapel alone. The silence was the same as the first time, but his heart was at peace. The dog, now gray-haired, walked slowly beside him. He knelt before the image of the Virgin Mary. He asked for nothing, only gave thanks. A gentle light filled the room once again. It was the final spiritual encounter. Zhuang felt a familiar, serene, and welcoming presence. The fragrance of flowers filled the chapel. He closed his eyes with a gentle smile. The dog lay peacefully at his feet. At that moment, Zhuan understood that the mission was complete. Nothing more needed to be said. Everything had been fulfilled. In the years that followed, the numbers were impressive. Thousands of families welcomed, animals rescued, and lives transformed. The mission spread across several countries, always maintaining the same simple essence. The story of the abandoned dog was told as the origin, a symbol of living faith, an eternal testimony. The chapel became a reference of hope. People from all over the world visited the place. The dog lived his final days there, in peace. He was buried near the chapel. A small plaque marked his story. Through the simple, God acts. The message remained alive. Today, this story reaches you. It proves that faith is born in compassion, that no destiny is condemned, that the Virgin Mary transforms sadness into joy. If this story touched your heart, do not ignore the calling. Share, pray, and help someone today, because the next miracle may begin in you. The faith of the simple moves heaven. If you felt something while hearing the story, respond with faith. Write Amen. Share with someone who needs hope. And remember, a small gesture can change an entire destiny.